The emergency signal had not sounded in 18,000 years. Most beings inside the Galactic assembly had never even heard it before. Some thought it was ceremonial, a relic left behind by founders who feared ancient threats that no longer existed. Others believed it was symbolic, something woven into the architecture of the assembly to remind the galaxy how fragile civilization once had been. Then the sound rolled through the station. Low, metallic, endless. Every conversation died instantly. The massive diplomatic chamber beneath the artificial sky froze as red bands of light ignited across the curved white walls. Delegates from 63 civilizations turned upward at the same moment, while automated security barriers unfolded from the floor with mechanical precision. Even the air changed. Calm atmospheric sense vanished, replaced by the sterile cold of lockdown protocols. Somewhere far below the assembly ring, ancient defense systems were waking up. Counselor Thel of the Naryx Dominion stood motionless in the center platform, his silver ceremonial armor glowing under the emergency lights. Unlike the others, he did not appear surprised. That was the first thing Ambassador Lena Ortez noticed. Not the alarm, not the panic spreading through the chamber, not even the terrified whispers erupting among species that had spent millennia believing large-scale war was extinct. No, it was the fact that the Dominion representative looked prepared. The Naryx Dominion, Thel announced calmly, is formally withdrawing from the Orion Compact effective immediately. The chamber erupted. Questions crashed into each other through overlapping translators. Several species stood so abruptly their seats collapsed backward. A pair of avian delegates actually attempted to leave before security doors sealed shut around the perimeter. But Lena stayed seated, quietly watching. Thel continued speaking to the chaos as though none of it mattered. Human expansion beyond the Perseus corridor constitutes a direct strategic threat to Dominion sovereignty. Diplomatic resolution is no longer considered viable. Military operations have already begun. That sentence changed the room. Not because war had been declared, because of the last four words. Already begun. Across the chamber, entire sections of holographic displays activated simultaneously. Star maps flooded the air. Trade routes disappeared under expanding crimson markers. Emergency reports started pouring into assembly systems faster than translators could process them. Civilian stations near the Perseus corridor were going dark. Freight convoys had vanished. Long-range communications across 3 sectors were collapsing one by one. Someone screamed when the first casualty estimates appeared. Then all 63 species turned toward the human delegation, toward Lena Ortez. Waiting. The humans had only joined the greater galactic community 2 centuries earlier. Compared to elder civilizations, they were considered young, emotional, commercially obsessed, culturally chaotic, and militarily unremarkable. They exported music, food, entertainment, industrial software, and atmospheric engineering technologies. They negotiated aggressively during trade disputes and argued loudly during diplomatic sessions, but they were not feared. Not really, which was why the next moment made no sense. Lena looked down at her tablet, not at the war maps, not at the casualty reports, at a single incoming message. She read it once. Then she exhaled slowly and asked, in a perfectly calm voice, "Have evacuation confirmations been verified for corridor civilian zones?" The entire chamber went silent again. The question hit harder than panic would have. Grand Marshal Thel narrowed his eyes for the first time. "You already evacuated?" Lena ignored him. "I asked a question." An assembly technician swallowed nervously while checking incoming feeds. We are receiving confirmations now. Civilian sectors appear mostly empty." "Mostly?" Lena asked. The technician hesitated. "Evacuation procedures began approximately 31 hours ago." Now, even Thel looked confused. "That is impossible," one delegate whispered, because the Dominion fleet had only crossed the neutral boundary 6 hours earlier. The realization spread slowly across the chamber like poison. Humanity had started evacuating worlds before the invasion fleet even appeared, before the declaration, before the emergency signal, before anyone should have known war was coming. Lena finally looked up at the Dominion representative, and for the first time since the alarms began, something cold moved behind her eyes. "You should leave the corridor," she said quietly. Immediately, they almost laughed. Almost. Then every military sensor inside the assembly ring detected something emerging from deep space beyond the Perseus corridor. Not one ship, not a fleet, an entire hidden network. And suddenly the oldest fear in galactic history was awake again. The first official Dominion casualty report arrived 3 hours later. It contained no casualties. That alone would have been strange enough to trigger concern across the assembly. But what truly unsettled the strategic analysts was the absence of engagement entirely. 12 Dominion battle groups had crossed into the Perseus corridor under full combat readiness. Their ships had entered human-controlled territory, expecting orbital defenses, military resistance, or at minimum civilian panic broadcasts flooding emergency channels. Instead, they found silence. Not abandoned silence. Prepared silence. Entire transport lanes had already been cleared before the fleets arrived. Cargo stations drifted empty but powered. Docking lights remained active. Automated systems continued maintaining traffic patterns for ships that no longer existed. Long-range scans still showed civilian population signatures on several colonies, yet boarding teams repeatedly discovered empty cities running on timed routines. Lights turned on and off according to normal schedules. Transit trains still moved through empty districts. Restaurants continued preparing meals no one would ever eat. One Dominion officer described the experience as invading a ghost civilization that had stepped out of reality moments before they arrived. That report spread privately through military channels within hours. Then things became worse. Inside the Galactic Assembly, fear was evolving into something more unstable. Confusion. The older species remembered ancient wars well enough to understand strategic withdrawal, but nothing about the human response resembled retreat. There were no refugee surges overwhelming nearby systems, no desperate diplomatic appeals, no emergency requests for allied intervention. Humanity was behaving as if events were unfolding exactly as expected. That terrified people. Lena Ortez remained inside the human embassy throughout most of the first day, participating in closed communications with Earth leadership. While the assembly descended into political chaos around her, delegates demanded explanations. Trade coalitions pushed for sanctions against the Dominion. Smaller systems openly panicked about border stability. The humans asked for none of it. Even more unsettling, they refused military assistance. By the second day, hidden patterns began surfacing inside Dominion intelligence reports. Recon drones sent into abandoned human systems started disappearing without combat recordings. Surveillance satellites lost synchronization for exactly 13 seconds at identical intervals across multiple sectors. Navigation systems occasionally displayed infrastructure that did not exist and failed to display structures that clearly did. At first, Dominion Command blamed technical corruption. Then a fleet vanished for 22 minutes. Not destroyed. Gone. One moment, the four-spear armada appeared on every tracking network in the corridor. The next, every ship disappeared simultaneously. Communication ceased completely. Emergency locator systems failed. Dominion High Command prepared for catastrophic losses before the fleet abruptly reappeared nearly 2 astronomical units from its recorded position. The commanders aboard insisted only seconds had passed. Their internal clocks disagreed by exactly 19 minutes. No one could explain it. The Dominion publicly dismissed the incident as navigational instability caused by gravitation anomalies near the corridor, but private military chatter became increasingly nervous. Some officers began revisiting archive files on human behavioral doctrine. Most found the same repeated conclusion from older assessments. Humans adapted unpredictably under pressure. The phrase sounded harmless until analysts started comparing it to real-time battlefield developments. Every expected human response was absent. Every unexpected possibility was increasing. Then came the asteroid belt discovery. A Dominion mining task force moving through the outer Perseus region detected abnormal metallic concentrations buried beneath a dead asteroid cluster. Initial scans suggested abandoned industrial infrastructure dating back at least 80 years. The task force assumed it was forgotten colonial equipment. Then they activated deeper scans. The asteroid field was hollow. Not naturally hollow. Engineered. Millions of tons of rock had been carefully reshaped around an internal framework larger than some orbital stations. Heat signatures pulsed faintly inside the structures, buried deep enough to avoid standard detection sweeps. Dominion commanders immediately ordered insertion teams into the field, only to discover every access route had already been sealed from within. Someone had evacuated the installation recently, very recently. Fresh thermal residue still lingered inside docking chambers. And at the center of the largest structure, Dominion forces discovered something that transformed military concern into outright paranoia. A single message, not hidden, waiting, displayed openly across a dead command console in 27 translated languages. You were supposed to find this later. The image of that message leaked before Dominion intelligence could contain it. Within hours, it spread through military networks, trade systems, civilian forums, and eventually the assembly itself. Some believed it was psychological warfare. Others argued it was fabricated propaganda. But the effect was immediate and devastating. For the first time since the war began, the Dominion no longer looked confident. They look-watched. That realization deepened on the third day when human civilian traffic suddenly reappeared across nearby sectors. At first, Dominion commanders assumed the evacuations had failed and refugees were attempting to flee through unsecured routes. Interception fleets moved quickly to surround the convoys, only to discover the ships were empty. Thousands of automated cargo carriers drifted silently through space, transmitting civilian identification codes, while carrying no life forms whatsoever. Dominion fleets spent precious hours chasing false evacuation movements, while real human assets vanished deeper into the corridor. Someone inside human command clearly understood how military attention worked, and was weaponizing it. Inside the assembly, private conversations about humanity began changing tone. Delegates who once described humans as emotional now called them unreadable. Species that mocked human entertainment obsessions quietly requested access to restricted historical archives concerning Earth's internal conflicts. Ancient warfare specialists started issuing uncomfortable assessments to their governments. A civilization that survived thousands of years of warfare against itself might not think like peaceful species anymore. It might prepare differently. The thought became impossible to ignore after first direct footage from a corridor finally reached the assembly. A Dominion scout ship had entered low orbit above the colony world of Arinder, expecting resistance positions hidden inside the mountains below. Instead, they found the cities illuminated, power grids fully operational, atmospheric traffic systems active, music broadcasting softly through empty streets. The scout commander descended cautiously through the silence while long-range sensors repeatedly failed to lock onto stable readings beneath the planet's crust. Then one of his officers noticed something horrifying. The human cities were too clean. No panic debris, no abandoned vehicles, no signs of rushed evacuation. The population of 11 million had disappeared with impossible precision, and every single camera across the colony was still running, watching them. The final transmission from the scout commander reached Dominion High Command 47 seconds later. "We are not ahead of them," he said quietly. "I think we are inside something they already planned." Then the transmission cut out, not with static, not with destruction, just silence. And far beyond the Perseus corridor, buried deep inside regions officially classified as inactive trade space, something enormous began waking up beneath the dark. By the fifth day of the conflict, the Dominion stopped referring to the Perseus corridor as an active war zone. Internally, new terminology began appearing across military communications. Contested cognitive environment. No one liked the phrase, but no other description fit anymore. The Dominion fleets were still advancing. On paper, they controlled more territory every hour. Human outer colonies continued falling silent one system at a time, and yet every strategic projection somehow looked worse the farther the Dominion pushed forward. Supply lines drifted out of synchronization. Fleet coordination delays multiplied unpredictably. Entire tactical simulations produced contradictory outcomes from identical battlefield data. The war was becoming impossible to measure, and the humans still had not committed a visible fleet. That fact haunted Grand Marshal Thel more than any battlefield loss. He stood inside the command amphitheater aboard the Dominion flagship Sovereign Dawn, while thousands of tactical symbols drifted across the holographic chamber around him. Entire sectors glowed red under Dominion control, but the map no longer felt like victory. It felt like movement through fog. "Report again," he ordered. The intelligence officer hesitated before speaking. Long-range communication arrays across all forward sectors remain unstable. Signal latency continues increasing without identifiable interference patterns. "That is not possible." "We know." The answer carried too much honesty. Thel turned toward the central display, where the latest disaster replayed in cold blue light. 3 Dominion strike fleets had converged on a human logistics hub hidden near the collapsed moon of Talos V. The operation should have been simple. Simulations predicted complete capture within 43 minutes. Instead, the fleet spent 6 hours firing on each other, not intentionally. Human signal distortions had manipulated targeting systems just enough to create cascading identification failures inside Dominion tactical networks. Friendly ships appeared hostile for fractions of seconds. Navigation markers shifted by microscopic distances. Defensive formations drifted gradually out of alignment until overlapping firing solutions triggered automated countermeasures. By the time commanders realized what was happening, 17 ships had crippled each other without a single human vessel entering the battlefield. Thel stared at the casualty numbers in silence. Then another report arrived. "Sir, we lost tracking on Corridor Node 7. "Destroyed?" "No, it vanished." The amphitheater grew still. Again, that word had started infecting every military conversation. Vanished. Human infrastructure vanished. Human fleets vanished. Entire thermal signatures vanished from active scans, while still physically existing inside the same regions of space. The Dominion had encountered stealth technology before. Every advanced civilization possessed some version of it, but this was different. Human systems were not hiding objects from sensors. They were manipulating expectation itself. Patterns became visible only after they had already been exploited. The Dominion's greatest military strength had always been predictive warfare. They modeled probabilities faster than opponents could react, calculated escalation outcomes before battles began, and crushed resistance through superior strategic certainty. Humans were dismantling that certainty piece by piece, and no one understood how. The first true breakthrough came accidentally. A damaged Dominion frigate, drifting near the outer corridor, attempted emergency synchronization with nearby navigation satellites after suffering reactor instability during another communications blackout. Instead of reconnecting to Dominion tactical systems, the frigate briefly intercepted a hidden human transmission network layered beneath civilian infrastructure frequencies. For exactly 11 seconds, Dominion intelligence heard the humans talking, not panicking, not scrambling, coordinating. Corridor phase alignment holding at 94%. Civilian migration completed 6 hours ahead of projection. Tell Pacific Command the decoy signatures worked better than expected. Repeat, do not engage unless they breach marker threshold. Then one final voice cut through the signal. Calm, focused, almost conversational. Let them keep moving inward. The transmission ended immediately afterward, but the damage was done. The Dominion finally understood the horrifying truth. The humans were not reacting to the invasion. They were guiding it. That realization reached the Galactic Assembly within hours. Fear spread quietly this time. No screaming debates. No diplomatic outrage. Just silence settling deeper into every corridor and observation chamber as more classified reports leaked into public awareness. The Assembly had spent centuries believing advanced warfare depended on overwhelming force, resource dominance, and technological superiority. Humanity appeared to be fighting an entirely different kind of war. A war built around perception. A war where confusion itself became ammunition. The older species started remembering uncomfortable things. Humans had evolved on a death world. Gravity stronger than galactic standard. Predators everywhere. Extreme climates. Resource instability. Constant competition. For most civilizations, survival meant escaping hardship through cooperation and technological advancement. But humanity's early history told a different story. They survived because they adapted faster than the dangers trying to kill them. And adaptation could become terrifying when weaponized. The next Dominion offensive proved exactly that. Determined to regain battlefield control, they'll authorize Operation Iron Divide, the largest coordinated fleet maneuver since the war began. 7 carrier groups entered the corridor simultaneously from multiple vectors, while electronic countermeasure fields blanketed nearby systems. The Dominion intended to overwhelm whatever hidden infrastructure humanity was using before it could react. For 17 minutes, the plan appeared successful. Then stars started disappearing. At first, commanders assumed sensor corruption, but the darkness spread. Entire regions of visible space began collapsing into artificial blind zones as massive gravitational distortions rippled across the corridor. Human civilian satellites suddenly ignited across dozens of systems, transmitting synchronized energy pulses directly into dormant infrastructure hidden throughout deep space. Asteroids moved, moons shifted orbit, and from inside regions previously classified as dead navigation sectors, gigantic structures unfolded into existence. Not ships, machines, ancient-looking, brutal constructions buried for decades beneath rock, ice, and debris. Enormous gravitational engines rotated silently across the darkness, while entire sections of the corridor physically changed shape around the Dominion fleets. Escape routes vanished. Stable warp corridors twisted apart. The battlefield itself was moving. Panic finally entered Dominion communications. Not fear of destruction, fear of helplessness. Fleet commanders watched in disbelief as carefully planned attack formations became impossible to maintain. Navigation systems could no longer predict safe travel vectors because the humans were actively rewriting the geometry of combat space faster than Dominion calculations could adapt. And still no major human fleet appeared. That absence became unbearable. What are they waiting for? One Dominion admiral demanded during a collapsing tactical conference. No one answered, because somewhere deep beneath the panic, another realization was beginning to emerge. Maybe the hidden machines were not the real defense system. Maybe the machines only existed to slow the Dominion down long enough for something else to arrive. That suspicion became infinitely worse when a long-range scout near the edge of the corridor captured the first confirmed image of a human warship. Only one ship, dark, silent, motionless against the stars, watching the battlefield from a distance. The scout attempted identification protocols and received no response. Then every system aboard the Dominion vessel shut down simultaneously. Life support, communications, weapons, engines, all gone. For 13 seconds, the ship drifted powerless through absolute silence. Then every screen aboard the Scout activated at once. A single sentence appeared across the displays. This is still the polite version. And far away inside the hidden depths of human-controlled space, sealed doors that had not opened in over a century slowly began unlocking one by one. The first Dominion survivors arrived 3 days later. Not prisoners. Rescued. That detail spread through the galaxy faster than the battles themselves. The crippled Dominion cruiser Vengeance of Dawn had drifted powerless near the fractured moons of Cardus after its reactors failed during another corridor distortion event. Internal life support collapsed shortly afterward. By the time emergency systems activated, hundreds aboard were already suffocating. The nearest Dominion fleet was 11 hours away. Human forces reached them first. Assembly observers expected boarding footage filled with executions, humiliation, or retaliatory violence after the Dominion's attacks on human territories. Instead, recovered recordings showed human emergency crews moving through smoke-filled corridors, carrying Dominion survivors toward evacuation shuttles, while medics treated wounded enemy soldiers beside burning reactor chambers. One clip spread everywhere. A terrified Dominion child clutching an oxygen mask stared at a human rescue worker through flickering red emergency lights and asked a question translators rendered identically across every language network. "Why are you helping us?" The human answered without hesitation, "Because you're dying." Nothing about the war made sense anymore. The Dominion publicly condemned the footage as manipulation, but internal morale began fracturing almost immediately afterward. Dominion crews returning from the corridor described humans in contradictory ways. They spoke of terrifying precision attacks capable of disabling fleets within minutes. They described impossible battlefield control and hidden infrastructure older than some civilizations. Then they described humans dragging wounded enemy soldiers out of collapsing ships. The contradiction infected military confidence. It was easier to hate monsters, much harder to fight an enemy that refused to behave like one. Inside the Galactic Assembly, debate surrounding humanity became increasingly unstable. Smaller species openly demanded sanctions against the Dominion after evidence surfaced confirming deliberate strikes against civilian transport lanes during the opening invasion. Older powers remained more cautious, not because they supported the Dominion, because they were becoming afraid of humanity in entirely new ways. The fear had little to do with violence. It came from restraint. Every strategic review reached the same conclusion. The humans could have inflicted catastrophic losses already. They simply had not chosen to. That possibility disturbed the assembly more than open brutality would have. Grand Arbor Saloon sat through 12 consecutive diplomatic sessions, listening to military analysts argue over casualty projections. Human attacks remained astonishingly controlled. Dominion ships were disabled rather than annihilated whenever possible. Logistics hubs vanished without civilian casualties. Human fleets avoided population centers even during retaliatory strikes. Someone inside Human Command was enforcing limits with obsessive precision, and no one understood why. The answer began surfacing through fragments. Classified references buried inside recovered human military archives. Ancient doctrine files repeatedly mentioning the same phrase. The last internal war. No context. No explanation. Just references. The phrase appeared attached to evacuation protocols, engagement restrictions, civilian protection systems, psychological warfare doctrine, even strategic infrastructure placement. It seemed connected to nearly everything humanity was doing during the conflict. Assembly intelligence divisions started digging deeper. Most found heavily restricted historical records dating back before humanity entered interstellar civilization. Entire sections of Earth's final global conflicts had been sealed behind military encryption, so old it predated modern galactic translation systems. That alone frightened people. Species did not usually hide old wars. Humans apparently buried theirs. Then the Dominion crossed a line. The attacks began on the colony world of Meridian Vale. Unlike previous assaults targeting navigation systems and military infrastructure, these strikes focused directly on civilian stability. Orbital bombardments disabled atmospheric processors. Power grids collapsed across major population centers. Food distribution systems failed within hours. Long-range communications were jammed completely. Nearly 40 million civilians remained on the planet. The Dominion never attacked the cities themselves. That was the point. They attacked survival. Assembly analysts recognized the strategy immediately because humanity's own historical records describe similar methods repeatedly throughout ancient Earth conflicts. Break infrastructure, exhaust populations, create pressure large enough to force surrender without direct extermination. Technically efficient, psychologically devastating. Dominion High Command believed the tactic would corner humanity emotionally. Civilian suffering would force human fleets into reckless engagements where superior Dominion firepower could finally achieve decisive victory. At first, the plan appeared successful. For the first time since the war began, intercepted human communications changed tone. Calm disappeared. Urgency spread. Hidden command channels lit up across the corridor, while encrypted military traffic surged beyond previous levels. Human fleets started moving openly now. Massive logistical convoys accelerated toward threatened colony systems under heavy escort. The Dominion interpreted this as desperation. They were wrong. Admiral Elias Ward watched the reports arrive inside Strategic Command beneath the Pacific Lunar Defense Ring. He read casualty projections in silence while officers around him prepared emergency deployment orders. Meridian Vale's atmospheric stability was deteriorating faster than expected. If Dominion suppression fields remained active, millions would suffocate within weeks. One young tactical officer finally broke the silence. "Sir, permission to authorize retaliatory escalation?" Everyone in the command chamber looked toward Ward, because they all understood what the question really meant. Permission to stop holding back. Ward did not answer immediately. Instead, he opened an old classified file resting silently in the corner of his command display. The file carried no military designation, no operational codes, only a title, Last Internal War Archive. He stared at it for several seconds, then closed it again. "No," he said quietly. Several officers looked stunned. "Sir, they're targeting civilian collapse." "I know. They think we won't escalate." Ward's expression hardened slightly. "They think we forgot what escalation costs." That sentence silenced the room. Moments later, new orders spread through human command networks across every active war zone. No retaliatory civilian strikes under any circumstance. Expand evacuation operations immediately. Deploy phase black logistics corridors. Continue infrastructure interdiction only. The Dominion celebrated the intercepted fragments of those orders. They misunderstood them completely, because while Dominion commanders believed humanity was refusing escalation out of weakness or moral hesitation, something else was actually happening inside hidden sectors beyond the corridor. Humanity was moving assets, massive ones. Entire classified shipyards buried near dark systems suddenly reactivated after decades of silence. Ancient military production lines awakened beneath frozen moons and abandoned asteroid fields. Fleets officially listed as dismantled began transmitting encrypted synchronization codes for the first time in generations. And beneath Earth's Atlantic Defense Archive, sealed chambers opened slowly one by one, while technicians stared upward at machines humanity had sworn never to use again. The war was changing, not because humanity was losing control, because humanity was running out of patience. The realization finally reached Grand Marshal Thel during a transmission intercepted near Meridian Vale late on the 7th day. The signal lasted only 6 seconds before encryption consumed it again, but 6 seconds was enough. A human voice spoke calmly through static-filled interference. "Confirm civilian extraction completion." Another voice answered immediately. 89% complete. A pause followed. Then came the final sentence. "Good. That means we can finally start fighting properly." And somewhere far beyond Dominion's scanning range, something impossibly large moved for the first time in over 100 years. The object emerging beyond Dominion's scanning range was not a ship. At least, not in any sense the galaxy understood. Its thermal signature appeared first, faint, impossible, larger than several moons combined. Then came gravitational disruption waves, spreading across nearby systems, like ripples moving through water. Automated observatories inside neutral territory started malfunctioning simultaneously as long-range telescopes attempted to focus on something their systems could not properly process. At first, assembly analysts believed an artificial planet had activated somewhere inside human-controlled space. Then the images arrived, and the entire galaxy realized humanity had been lying about the scale of its preparations. The structure was buried inside the hollow remains of a dead gas giant orbiting a black dwarf star nearly 400 light-years from the Perseus corridor. Layer after layer of frozen planetary mass split apart slowly as colossal mechanical frameworks unfolded beneath the ice. Gigantic rings rotated around the emerging construct, while dormant reactors brighter than suns ignited one by one inside the darkness. No weapons were immediately visible. That made it worse, because military experts could not determine when the machine ended. The first official human response came 12 minutes later through every major communication network in assembly space. One sentence. Archive Fortress Hecate returned to active status at 417 Terran Standard. No explanation followed. No threats. No demands. Just confirmation. The Galactic Assembly descended into panic, unlike anything seen since the opening declaration of war. Emergency sessions erupted across dozens of systems simultaneously, while strategic observers demanded immediate clarification from a human embassy. Even species normally resistant to fear began issuing internal evacuation advisories around critical infrastructure worlds. Humanity had hidden something enormous, something old, and suddenly every government in known space wanted to know why. Lena Ortez finally appeared before the assembly again after nearly 8 days of absence. The moment she entered the chamber, conversations died instantly. Delegates who once treated humans like ambitious newcomers now watched it with the cautious silence reserved for dangerous things. Grand Arbiter Saloon spoke first. Was Hecate. Lena looked tired for the first time since the war began. That, she answered carefully, depends on who's asking. The chamber stirred uneasily. The assembly is asking, Saloon replied. Lena nodded once before activating a projection above the chamber floor. Ancient human star maps appeared in the air, stretching back centuries before first contact with galactic civilization. Hundreds of marked systems glowed across the display, spreading outward from Earth in strange, uneven patterns. These were humanity's first extrasolar expansion routes. Lena explained quietly. Before contact, before the assembly, before we understood what existed beyond our own region of space. Several delegates frowned immediately. The routes made no economic sense. They avoided resource-rich sectors, ignored habitable worlds, circled strangely around dead systems and unstable stellar regions. Then Lena expanded the map farther. The chamber went silent. A second pattern appeared beyond human territory. Massive regions of space completely avoided by early human exploration despite being strategically valuable. Entire sectors had been deliberately bypassed for reasons no one understood. Ortez finally answered a question none of them wanted to ask. Humanity did not build the Hecate fortresses for the Dominion. The room became perfectly still. We built them, she continued softly, because during our first deep-range exploration period, we found evidence that something else had existed out there before us. No one interrupted her. No one breathed. Our early colonies discovered extinct systems, dead civilizations, entire star networks stripped clean of biological activity. Lena's voice remained calm, but something behind it had changed. At first we thought they were isolated collapses. Then we found more and more, different species, different technologies, same ending. Grand Arbiter Saloon stared at the map above the chamber. You believed there was an external threat. We believed there had been one before, Lena corrected quietly, and we had no guarantee it was gone. Shock moved visibly through the assembly, because suddenly everything about humanity's behavior started making terrible sense. The hidden infrastructure, the evacuation precision, the ancient military archives, the obsessive preparation. Humans had not spent centuries quietly preparing for conquest. They had been preparing for extinction, and they never told anyone. The Dominion received the same information almost simultaneously. Grand Marshal Thel stood motionless inside the Sovereign Dawn, while intelligence officers replayed assembly transmissions in stunned silence around him. Every new revelation rewrote strategic assumptions faster than military analysts could adapt. You are telling me, one officer whispered carefully, that humanity built these defenses expecting something worse than us. No one answered, because everyone in the room already understood the implication. If the Dominion was not considered humanity's worst-case scenario, then humanity had been holding back far more than anyone imagined. The psychological effect across Dominion fleets was immediate. Fear deepened into something heavier. Insignificance. Soldiers who once viewed humans as reckless younger species now faced a civilization that had apparently spent generations preparing for apocalyptic war against an unknown enemy beyond explored space, and somehow still chose restraint. Then came the footage from Meridian Vale. Dominion intelligence expected chaos after the atmospheric collapse attacks. Instead, hidden reconnaissance drones captured scenes no strategist could fully explain. Human civilians evacuated entire megacities with astonishing discipline. Emergency corridors operated continuously without visible panic. Families moved through collapsing infrastructure zones calmly, while volunteer networks distributed supplies with military-level coordination. There were no riots, no societal breakdown, no mass hysteria, just efficiency. One Dominion analyst studying the footage finally said a thing no one wanted to admit aloud. They've rehearsed this before. Not literally. Culturally, humanity behaved like a species psychologically conditioned for catastrophe. And the deeper Dominion intelligence dug into Earth's history, the more terrifying that conclusion became. Ancient human civilization survived plagues, collapses, world wars, resource disasters, climate instability, nuclear brinkmanship, and near total societal fragmentation over and over across thousands of years. Any one of those events would have shattered most known species permanently. Humans adapted through all of them. The realization spread slowly across military command structures. The Dominion had mistaken emotional intensity for fragility. In reality, human emotional resilience bordered on unnatural. That understanding became infinitely more dangerous when Hecate activated fully. The giant fortress hidden inside the dead gas giant finally completed its emergence on the 10th day of the war. Massive energy signatures surged across nearby systems, while gravitational distortions stabilized into terrifying precision. New scans estimated the structure's internal volume exceeded several planetary capitals combined. Then long-range Dominion probes detected movement around the fortress. Ships, hundreds of them, not newly deployed, stored. Entire fleets hidden inside Hecate's internal chambers for decades. Ancient warships humanity had never shown the galaxy. And as Dominion intelligence scrambled desperately to recalculate strategic projections, a final classified human archive leaked onto assembly networks through unknown channels. The document contained only one sentence. If the fortresses ever wake, IT means humanity believes extinction is possible again. Then, for the first time since the war began, every hidden human fleet in known space started moving at once. The galaxy stopped sleeping after that. Trade corridors emptied almost overnight as civilian traffic vanished into secured systems. Neutral, governments activated planetary defense grids that had not powered on in centuries. Insurance markets collapsed first, followed by interstellar freight stability. Then diplomatic scheduling infrastructure itself as entire regions of known space enter emergency operating conditions. Humanity had moved hidden fleets into open space, and no one knew what came next. Dominion High Command certainly did not. Inside the command citadel orbiting Naryx Prime, Grand Marshal Thel stood before a tactical projection that no longer resembled a war map. Human fleet markers multiplied faster than Dominion intelligence could verify them. Entire strike groups emerged from supposedly inactive sectors, while encrypted military traffic exploded across dozens of systems simultaneously. The worst part was a pattern. There wasn't one. Human deployments ignored traditional strategic logic. Fleets appeared near vulnerable Dominion infrastructure, then vanished before interception forces arrived. Deep-range sensor stations went dark without warning. Supply depots lost contact with Central Command. Patrol groups reported brief encounters with massive unidentified vessels that disappeared moments later into regions impossible for ships that size to navigate. The Dominion's predictive warfare systems began failing catastrophically. For the first time in 11,000 years, Dominion strategic AIs officially classified a military conflict as behaviorally unstable. That designation had only existed in theoretical simulations before now. Human coordination makes no sense. One analyst admitted during an emergency war session, their fleets are operating independently without degrading overall strategic cohesion. That is impossible. It should be. They'll stare at the data, in silence, because privately, he was beginning to understand something horrifying. Humanity's battlefield doctrine was not built around efficiency. It was built around adaptation under pressure. Every time the Dominion identified a stable pattern, humans changed the conditions entirely. Every tactical advantage became temporary the moment it was understood. Human fleets behaved less like organized military structures and more like living systems reacting dynamically to environmental threats. The Dominion had spent millennia perfecting control. Humans had spent millennia surviving chaos. And chaos was spreading now. The tipping point came with the attack on Arden's Reach. Unlike previous Dominion operations targeting infrastructure collapse, this assault was meant to break human morale permanently. Arden's Reach housed nearly 70 million civilians, most evacuated from earlier conflict zones. Dominion hardliners argued the humans had become overconfident behind their hidden defenses and needed psychological shock severe enough to destabilize public support for continued resistance. So they bypassed military targets entirely. 3 Dominion strike carriers emerged directly above the refugee zones without warning. The bombardment lasted 4 minutes, long enough Entire districts vanished beneath plasma fire while emergency shields collapsed across civilian sectors. Atmospheric containment ruptured. Evacuation corridors failed instantly. By the time Dominion fleets withdrew, millions were dead or dying beneath burning skies visible from orbit. The footage spread everywhere. For several hours afterward, human communication networks went almost completely silent. That silence frightened the assembly more than any fleet movement. Grand Arbiter Saloon watched emergency transmissions arrive from human territories throughout the night. Rescue operations flooded damaged systems immediately, but something deeper was changing beneath the surface of human responses. The calm discipline defining earlier evacuations had shifted into something colder, focused, angry, and for the first time since the war began, intercepted human military communications stopped emphasizing restraint. Inside Strategic Command beneath the Pacific Lunar Defense Ring, Admiral Elias Ward listened to casualty reports without moving. Around him, entire command divisions worked in absolute silence, while casualty projections updated continuously across tactical displays. No one spoke unless necessary. Finally, one officer placed a data tablet beside Ward's station. Confirmed civilian losses exceed projections. Ward nodded once. Another officer hesitated before speaking carefully. Sir, Hecate Command is requesting authorization. The room seemed to tighten. Everyone understood what that meant. For days, humanity had deployed hidden fleets without activating its oldest military assets fully. The Hecate fortresses carried weapon systems built for extinction-level conflict scenarios. Technology so destructive to humanity had buried them long before joining galactic civilization. Until now, Ward had refused activation. The silence stretched. Then another transmission arrived from Arden's Reach. Live rescue feeds. Human civilians clawing through burning debris searching for survivors, while emergency workers carried children through collapsing atmospheric storms. Entire refugee columns moved across shattered districts under fire without descending into panic. People kept helping each other even while cities died around them. Ward watched the footage for nearly a minute. Then he finally spoke. Opened the archive. Every officer in the chamber froze. A sealed command interface rose slowly from beneath the central tactical platform. Ancient authentication systems activated one by one, while buried military networks older than interstellar diplomacy itself came online beneath human space. Deep within hidden sectors, the Hecate fortresses responded instantly. The galaxy felt it happen. Power signatures erupted across long-range sensors with such intensity that several assembly monitoring stations temporarily overloaded. Gigantic dormant systems hidden inside dead systems awakened simultaneously, while ancient human warships shifted formation around the fortress networks. Then the first confirmed extinction-class vessel emerged. The ship carried no visible weapons. It did not need them. Nearly 30 kilometers long, the vessel drifted silently from Hecate's internal docks, surrounded by gravitational distortions powerful enough to bend nearby starlight around its hull. Dominion observers struggled to classify its structure because portions of the ship appeared physically reconfigurable during movement. Its designation spread through intercepted military traffic moments later. UNS Thanatos. The reaction across Dominion Command was immediate and catastrophic. Some officers demanded withdrawal instantly. Others insisted humanity was bluffing, arguing no civilization would deploy weapons powerful enough to destabilize galactic order itself. But fear had already infected the command structure too deeply. Because buried inside ancient Dominion historical archives existed references to civilizations that vanished suddenly long before modern galactic peace. And now humanity possessed warships named after death itself. The first engagement happened near the shattered moons of Talvern. A Dominion assault fleet attempting to reinforce outer corridor positions encountered the Thanatos emerging from folded space transition without warning. Dominion commanders immediately opened fire with full carrier support. The battle lasted 93 seconds. Not because the Dominion fleet was destroyed, because the fleet ceased functioning as an organized military force almost instantly. Humanity's extinction-class systems did not attack conventionally. Dominion targeting networks collapsed under impossible signal interference, while entire sections of local space distorted unpredictably around the Thanatos. Weapons fired in the wrong directions. Tactical synchronization vanished completely. Several ships lost gravity control and drifted helplessly out of formation, while human strike vessels moved through the chaos with terrifying precision. Then the Thanatos transmitted a message across every open channel. "This is not escalation," a calm human voice said. "This is containment." The distinction horrified everyone who heard it, because if this was still containment, what would escalation look like? That question spread rapidly through the assembly, while Dominion fleets across the corridor began retreating without centralized orders. Panic transmissions flooded military channels. Rumors exploded faster than facts. Some crews believed humanity had awakened pre-contact superweapons. Others claimed the Hecate fortresses were not defensive systems at all, but remnants from an older war humanity never spoke about. Then another secret surfaced, one hidden deep enough that even most humans had never known it existed. The Hecate archives were not humanity's final contingency. They were humanity's restrained option. And somewhere beneath Earth itself, systems humanity had sworn never to activate again began receiving emergency authorization requests. The authorization requests originated from Earth. That fact alone shattered whatever confidence remained inside the Dominion. For nearly 2 centuries, humanity had deliberately decentralized its military infrastructure across hundreds of systems. Analysts once interpreted that strategy as political fragmentation, proof humans lacked unified command discipline compared to older civilizations. Now the truth looked very different. Humanity had dispersed its strength intentionally, so that if Earth itself ever started activating buried systems, the situation would already be catastrophic. Deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, beneath layers of pressure-sealed tectonic vaults unknown to the Assembly or even most human governments, ancient machinery awakened slowly for the first time since the final years of humanity's last planetary wars. The systems had names no modern military database contained: Black Veil, Cerberus Lock, Silent Ocean Protocol. Across hidden facilities, aging officers stared silently at command screens they never believed would activate in their lifetimes. Entire generations of humans had considered those systems mythological remnants from darker centuries of Earth's history. But the machinery was real, and now it was listening again. The Dominion learned pieces of this through fractured intelligence leaks and intercepted panic from neutral observers. None of the fragments formed a complete picture, but together they painted something infinitely worse than certainty. Humanity possessed another level of escalation, one even humans feared. That realization hit Grand Marshal Thel harder than the battlefield losses. He stood alone inside the observation chamber of the Sovereign Dawn, watching distant stars drift silently across the darkness, while Dominion fleets continued withdrawing from the corridor in fragmented waves. Officially, the retreat was strategic repositioning. Everyone knew it was fear. Thel replayed intercepted footage from Talvern again. The Thanatos had disabled an entire assault fleet without maximizing firepower once. Human forces still avoided civilian targets, still minimized casualties wherever possible, still offered surrender corridors before major engagements. Even now, even after Arden's reach, that was the part he could no longer rationalize. "Why?" he whispered quietly. Not to anyone, just to the darkness itself. Because Dominion doctrine would never have shown such restraint after civilian massacres. Every strategic principle in their military history demanded overwhelming retaliatory force to establish deterrence immediately. Humans clearly possessed that capability. So, why were they refusing to use it? The answer arrived several hours later through a captured human transmission accidentally intercepted near a hidden evacuation corridor. The signal was fragmented, damaged by battlefield interference, but one section came through clearly enough for Dominion translators to reconstruct. A tired human voice asked, "If we activate the deep systems, how long before we become what we buried?" Silence followed. Then another voice answered softly, "That depends on whether we remember why we buried them in the first place." They'll listen to the exchange 3 times. Something cold settled inside him afterward, because suddenly he understood the emotional core of the war. Humanity was not restraining itself for the Dominion's sake. Humanity was restraining itself because it was afraid of itself. That realization spread rapidly through higher Dominion command as additional intelligence surfaced regarding Earth's ancient conflicts. The deeper analysts dug into restricted human archives, the more horrifying the pattern became. Human civilization had nearly destroyed itself multiple times before reaching the stars. Not metaphorically, literally. Ancient wars capable of planetary devastation. Autonomous weapon systems that hunted populations indiscriminately. Engineered famines. Atmospheric collapse events. Nuclear exchanges severe enough to alter ecosystems permanently. Humanity survived all of it, but survival had changed them. The species that entered galactic civilization was not humanity at its most violent. It was humanity after centuries spent trying to ensure that violence never consumed them again. And now the Dominion had forced those buried instincts back toward the surface. Inside the Galactic Assembly, fear evolved into something almost existential. Delegates no longer debated who would win the war. That question felt answered already. The true terror now centered around where humanity's limits actually existed, because every new military revelation carried the same disturbing implication. The humans still were not fully fighting. Grand Arbiter Saloon convened the largest emergency session in Assembly history, while hidden evacuation plans quietly activated beneath the station itself. No one mentioned the evacuation protocols openly, but everyone knew they existed now. 63 civilizations gathered beneath the Assembly dome, while war reports flooded the chamber continuously. Dominion infrastructure failures accelerated daily. Human precision strikes dismantled shipyards, communication rays, and military logistics corridors across Dominion territory with surgical efficiency. Still no civilian bombardments. Still no extermination campaigns. Still restraint. One delegate finally voiced the fear hanging over the chamber. If humanity possesses this level of force, the representative asked carefully, what exactly are they still holding back? No one answered, because nobody wanted the answer spoken aloud. Then Earth transmitted directly to the Assembly. Not a threat, not a demand, a warning. Admiral Elias Ward appeared across the chamber holograms, looking older than he had only days earlier. Exhaustion lined his face beneath the cold blue light of tactical displays flickering behind him. The Dominion has initiated evacuation from several occupied sectors, he said calmly. Humanity will allow unrestricted withdrawal. Confused murmurs spread immediately through the chamber. Ward continued before anyone could interrupt. However, Dominion hardline factions are preparing retaliatory strikes against population centers during retreat operations. We are aware of the targets. His expression darkened slightly. If those attacks proceed, Earth Command will authorize strategic escalation beyond current containment measures. Silence swallowed the chamber. One delegate finally whispered the question everyone feared. What does that mean? Ward hesitated. For the first time since the war began, he looked genuinely uncertain. Then he answered. It means humanity will stop prioritizing restraint over survival. Nothing else needed explaining. The transmission ended moments later, but panic spread instantly across Assembly space afterward. Emergency diplomatic channels overloaded, while Dominion representatives demanded clarification from their own military leadership regarding the rumored hardline attacks. Several governments openly threatened sanctions against the Dominion if escalation continued. Others quietly began preparing for worst-case extinction scenarios, because everyone sensed the same thing approaching now. A line, and humanity stood dangerously close to crossing it. The final trigger came less than 12 hours later. A rogue Dominion faction, refusing retreat protocols, launched unauthorized bombardments against civilian transports escaping the outer corridor. The attack destroyed 17 evacuation ships before human defense forces intervened. Millions died in under 4 minutes. This time, humanity did not respond publicly. No warnings. No assembly statements. No diplomatic communication. Across every active warfront, human fleets simply stopped moving for exactly 7 minutes. Then the hidden systems beneath Earth activated completely. For one impossible moment, the stars around Sol dimmed. Entire sensor networks across nearby sectors overloaded simultaneously, while gravitational readings spiked beyond known technological limits. And from beneath Earth's oceans, something ancient began rising toward the surface. The object rising beneath Earth's oceans was larger than cities. Assembly observatories captured the first images through distorted sensor feeds, while emergency systems struggled to stabilize against impossible gravitational interference radiating outward from the Sol system. Entire coastlines across Earth glowed beneath the night side of the planet as ancient structures broke through the Atlantic in silence, shedding millions of tons of seawater into the atmosphere. At first, observers thought continents themselves were moving. Then the scale resolved properly, and the galaxy understood why humanity had buried the systems beneath oceans deep enough to hide mountains. The structure emerging from the Atlantic was not merely a weapon. It was an answer. Gigantic black metallic spires unfolded from beneath the sea, while energy patterns spread across Earth's orbital space, like neural pathways activating after centuries of dormancy. Thousands of hidden installations synchronized instantly with a rising construct. The moon itself lit with dormant military grids never disclosed the assembly. Asteroid defense arrays awakened across Sol's outer systems. Humanity had transformed its home system into a fortress long before joining galactic civilization, and no one had known. The Dominion surrendered 41 minutes later, not because Earth threatened retaliation, because every surviving Dominion commander realized the same horrifying truth simultaneously. Humanity had prepared for enemies far worse than them, and if pushed fully into survival mode, the resulting war would not end with military defeat. It would end with civilizations disappearing. The surrender transmission reached the Galactic Assembly in absolute silence. Grand Marshal Thel appeared alone aboard the Sovereign Dawn, exhaustion hollowing his expression beneath flickering emergency lights. Behind him, Dominion tactical displays showed collapsing fleet cohesion across every active front. "We acknowledge strategic failure," he said quietly. "All Dominion forces are ordered to disengage immediately from human territories and occupied systems. We request cessation of hostilities under neutral supervision." No pride remained in his voice, only recognition. The chamber stayed silent for several seconds before Grand Arbiter Sullivan turned toward the human delegation. Lena Ortez stood motionless near the center of the assembly floor, watching the surrender feed without visible triumph. If anything, she looked relieved. That unsettled the chamber more than celebration would have. "You have their surrender," Sullivan said carefully. "What are humanity's terms?" Every species leaned forward, because this was the moment history always repeated itself. Victorious powers expanded. They demanded territory, reparations, obedience, influence. Every galactic war eventually transformed into political domination afterward. That was the pattern civilization understood. Lena answered softly. Pre-war borders restored. Confused silence followed. "No annexations," she continued. "No occupation zones. Dominion civilian infrastructure remains untouched. Human forces will withdraw from active military operations once evacuation corridors are secured." Several delegates genuinely looked unable to process the answer. One finally spoke. "That's all." Lena nodded. "The Dominion withdraws. The attacks stop. The war ends." The chamber erupted instantly. Questions crashed into each other through translation systems, while diplomats demanded clarification from every direction. Dominion representatives stared openly in disbelief. Even Thel's exhausted composure cracked for the first time. "You could take our core systems," he said quietly. "Your fleets are already inside strategic range." "We know." "Then why not?" The entire assembly fell silent again, because suddenly everyone wanted the answer. Lena stood still for several moments before speaking. "When humanity first reached the stars," she said softly, "we believed the greatest danger in the universe would come from outside us. That's why we built the fortresses. That's why we buried weapons beneath oceans and hid fleets inside dead worlds." She looked upward toward the massive holographic projection of Earth floating above the assembly chamber. "But eventually we realized something worse." The room remained perfectly still. "The greatest danger was never what war could do to us," Lena continued quietly. "It was what war could turn us back into." No one interrupted her, because suddenly every hidden piece of humanity fit together. The restraint, the evacuations, the precision strikes, the refusal to target civilians even after Arden's reach, the fear inside human command every time escalation became necessary. Humans were not avoiding brutality because they lacked the capacity for it. They were avoiding it because they understood it intimately. The Dominion had spent millennia studying war academically. Humanity had survived it personally. Lena finally looked directly toward the Dominion feed. "You thought humans were peaceful because we forgot how to fight," she said. "The truth is, we became peaceful because we never forgot." Silence consumed the assembly, not shock silence, reflective silence. The kind that comes when an entire civilization realizes it misunderstood another species completely. The surrender accord was signed 18 hours later aboard a neutral station orbiting the outer Perseus corridor. Human representatives arrived with minimal security despite possessing overwhelming military superiority. Dominion leadership complied with every withdrawal condition immediately. No one wanted to discover where humanity's true limits actually ended, and through all of it, the hidden systems beneath Earth slowly powered down again. The ocean structures descended first. Then the lunar grids dimmed. Then the fortress network surrounding Sol disappeared quietly back into darkness. Humanity buried its monsters once more. That image stayed with the galaxy long after the war ended. Not the fleets, not the battles, not even the hidden weapons. The thing civilizations remembered most was the choice. Humanity could have conquered, could have annihilated, could have answered civilian massacres with extinction. Instead, they stopped the moment survival was secured. That terrified some species, inspired others, but it changed all of them. In the months following surrender, diplomatic patterns across the assembly shifted permanently. Species that once treated humans as ambitious newcomers began approaching them differently now. Carefully, respectfully, sometimes cautiously. Military alliances restructured overnight. Strategic doctrines evolved. Entire civilizations reevaluated centuries of assumptions about power and peace. Because humanity had revealed something the galaxy had forgotten during 18,000 years without major war. Peace was not the absence of strength. Real peace required strength disciplined, enough not to consume everything around it. Months later, Grand Arbiter Saloon completed the official historical summary of the conflict. She rewrote the final sentence 6 times before settling on the version transmitted permanently into assembly archives. The war revealed that humanity possessed terrifying capabilities hidden beneath centuries of diplomacy and restraint. Then she stopped writing. After a long moment, she added one final line beneath it. The more important revelation was that they feared those capabilities more than anyone else ever could. And somewhere on Earth, beneath ordinary skies filled with ordinary people returning slowly to ordinary lives, ancient systems slept once again beneath oceans and stone, waiting, just in case humanity ever needed to protect peace from extinction one more time.